Hey, everybody, and welcome to tonight's sort of like fireside virtual chat. I'm joined by David Gourley, who's going to be talking to us about public service loan forgiveness. And this one is one of these topics I know very little about. I had student loans back when I went to college, which was a long time ago, probably like over 10, 11 years ago since I took out student loans, and I paid them off very quickly because I only had a small student loan. So I didn't know much about public loan forgiveness. You could even see it in the title of the event cover. That was like public student loan forgiveness, because I was like, that's what this is. Like, it's about student loans, but actually no, it's about service loans. So that was a correction I had to throw out there from the very beginning. But very excited to have David joining us, because student loans are top of mind right now. We know that there was a plan. Everyone was kind of like, yes, I'm going to get some student loans forgiven here. Maybe it could have been 10 grand, 20 grand. People were filling out applications. People were getting like, yep, your application's been submitted. Then the application stopped being accepted. And then we had the Supreme Court ruling recently, which kind of threw everything backwards from what we thought was going to happen. So we're going to talk through that tonight. And then we're going to look at, well, what now? If you have student loans as a teacher, what can you do? What can you expect to happen in the near future? If you're having any trouble with repaying your student loans, what are your options? That's what we're going to chat about tonight. And I'm very excited to do this with you all. This is the first one of these webinars this summer. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to share this with everybody.
So David, you're a former teacher. You left teaching in 2020, I think you told me, and you went into financial planning. Why'd you do that? I mean, we all love being teachers. Like, who leaves teaching? Nobody leaves teaching. It's such a a fulfilling and easy career. But what made you want to leave that to go into financial planning?
Yeah, so it really comes down to my wife and I when we were on our journey of. So I know that you're involved in Choose FI. So I found Choose FI a long time ago. The 403BY's group and the Teach and Retire Rich podcast. And so we went down this path ourselves of trying to get our finances in order, and we didn't know where to turn, and we didn't really have anybody that we could trust to turn to when we were trying to deal with our own finances. And in reaching out to financial advisors and we didn't really know what a financial planner was at the time, but in reaching out to financial advisors, we talked to a very sleazy 403B sales agent. And we also talked to a large company, which I won't name who they are. I won't throw them under the bus too bad, but a representative from a large company that had a $250,000 asset minimum. And it's like, okay, well, we're two young teachers at the time. What are we doing here? And so that kind of started my journey of I got mad, and I was like, I want to help other teachers. And the funny part is that in going that route of helping other teachers, one of the pain points that came up time and time again was student loans. And so that's why we're here, right?
Yeah. I mean, are you even a teacher if you haven't had a conversation with a sleazy 403B salesman or a person? I don't know. I haven't met anyone who hasn't had one of those conversations yet. I also had that same, experience, new teacher, got the spiel, and you don't recognize, of course, that the people who are giving out cookies in the staff room are there because they can afford to be there. Like, they're throwing all this money and free food at you because when they snag you, it's well worth it for them. So there's a great return for them. And that's usually, it should be a huge red flag to be like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, this shouldn't be that profitable for them. It's supposed to help me, not them. But yes, 403Bs, totally different conversation. I'm hoping to have Dan Otter come in from 403BYs to talk to us about the 403B situation. But yeah.
And they started the conversation with, do you care about your financial future? Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Of course, you get that. That's a classic sales move. Get them to yes as fast as you can. So the moment you get them to say yes, they're like, okay, now my brain's aligning with what you're saying. And of course, there's no other answer. That's like saying, do you like money? Would you like to be rich someday? No.
Exactly.
No.
Exactly.
All right. So can you talk us through, President Biden, one of his campaign promises was to eliminate student loan debt for, I think, anyone who had public student loan debt from like a public university. I forget what the exact promise was. Can you start us there, and then what has happened since?
Yeah. So basically he came out and said, okay, we're going to do this $10,000. And if you have a Pell Grant from when you were in your undergrad days, if you had a Pell Grant, we were going to give you $20,000 of student debt cancellation. And I wouldn't even call it forgiveness, just canceled. And then there was several different places that ended up trying to sue. And there were some places out of Texas, but eventually Missouri, which is actually where I'm located, in Mohila, which is out of St. Louis area, they went basically to I think it was like the Ninth Appellate Court, whatever it was. It was a very conservative court. It got pushed up, and it ended up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, they took some time. It took actually several months. And then eventually, recently, there was that 6-3 ruling against the student loan cancellation, where they said this will negatively affect Mohila, and they have what's called standing. And standing was the big issue that was going to determine if the loan cancellation went through or not. And so they determined that Mohila was going to be negatively affected by this student loan cancellation, and therefore they ended up not going through with it. And so everybody, I think that was top of mind and top of the news cycle for a couple of days. We live in the very quick news cycle, but for a day or two, it was all anybody could talk about. So that's where we're at right now as far as that.
Yeah, and we actually planned this conversation before all of those headlines, where we're like, okay, like if this goes through and some stuff gets canceled, like what does that mean? And then the Supreme Court decision happened, and we're like, okay, now we've really got some stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm sure your social media feeds were probably filled with lots of kind of clickbaity stuff about student loan forgiveness being canceled. You're going to be now having to pay your student loans again, which during COVID was turned off. Is that correct, David? Or what was that about? Because I haven't had a student loan now in about 6, 7, 8 years. I don't know when I actually paid it off, but haven't had one in a while. So I kind of just ignored all of that news around COVID when it came to like student loan payments being turned off, turned on, whatever it was. What has been the status of student loans up until now?
Yeah, so starting in March of 2020, they stopped any federally held student loan that is a direct loan. So there's two separate types of loans. We've got the FFEL. Well, actually, there's several different types, but the two main types are FFEL, which is like Family Federal Education Loan, I believe it stands for. And then we have direct loans. And anything that was direct loans was paused, and you didn't have to make any payments. No payment was required. No interest was accruing. And then the other one was the FFEL loans, and those, except for a very, very small percentage of them, they did require the consistent payment, or else you would go into default. And so they did not pause those at all.
Okay. And so when you say pause, people could still choose to pay down on if they wanted to, but essentially they were allowed to keep this money, increase their cash flow at the time, because we were saying COVID was going to be this huge impact on people's finances. Unemployment was skyrocketing. We had stimulus payments coming out for the same reason of just kind of putting cash back in people's pockets. And this was a way to kind of just reduce the burden of, I guess, increase the amount of discretionary income that people would have to spend on the areas that they needed to. They'd have some choice over it if you stop their student loan from coming out. Okay, so there have been some people, guys, who haven't paid a student loan payment since then, and we're maybe banking on this thing being canceled. What's going to happen now? Like, given the ruling, when do student loan payments start back up? Is it like next week, or do we have some time?
Yeah, so interest is going to start accruing on them in September, and the first round of payments will start in October. So it's coming up quick. And the big thing is that, we're in July right now. And as you mentioned, nobody's had to pay these things for 3.5 years. So I think what's happened, especially with, inflation on the rise, everything costs more. And, lifestyle inflation is a real thing as well. I'm worried that a lot of people are not going to be able to pay on their loans when they come due here in the next couple of months, because I think it'll be a shock for a lot of people who, have to build that extra, whether it's 50, 100, 200, 400, 500, whatever it may be. I think it's gonna be a shock when that happens to the budget.
Yeah, because I can't imagine most people have been like, oh yeah, my student loan payment's paused. The responsible thing, of course, would have been like, let me just take that, put it into a savings account, and when my student loans do get turned back on again, I will have this pot of money ready to go that has been accruing interest for me instead of against me. Yep. That's a very privileged position to be in the first place if you could do that, but also that would take a lot of foresight, budgeting skills, which we all know are very lacking in a huge percentage of the US population. So now we're going to have this moment come where it's just 0 to full repayment, that what you were doing beforehand is going to start in October, or is it going to kind of like gradually ease you in?
It's going to start. Now, the interesting thing is that they're going to do a 12-month, what they're calling an on-ramp period. And during those 12 months, you don't have to make any payments. Now, interest will be accruing, but they're trying to give people time to figure it out, more or less. There will not be any defaults during that time. They're saying, of course, anything with student loans can change. Like we're putting this out on July 11th. This could all be completely changed by next week. But they're saying that there's not going to be any defaults. There's not going to be any notification to your creditors. There's not going to be any credit report dings. You have 12 months to get your affairs in order. Now, the reason why that's interesting for a lot of people is because and I know we're going to switch to public service loan forgiveness later, but in public service loan forgiveness, I'll be referring to it as PSLF a lot. In PSLF, you can actually manipulate your payment based on how you file your taxes. And so if you have not filed them separately, and it would be more advantageous for you to do so, you have time from now until March when you file, or February, or whenever that may be, that you don't have to pay. So that way you can get everything in order for next year, file your taxes appropriately, and then start back your repayment. So there's some strategies that can go into place that can save you a lot of money here.
Okay, we'll definitely come back to that. So the tax strategy for kind of managing your payments. What if you were a new graduate? So like you graduated in the last 3 years. I'm assuming you haven't been making any student loan payments, or did new graduates just kind of like, you took out a loan during this pause time, so you're just going to start paying like normal, or are they going to be in for like this very first payment?
Yeah, they're going to be in for that very first payment. So they have not had payments either for unless you had private loans. So this is only federal, but any federal student loan that was taken out in the last couple of years, they got rid of the FFEL loans. I believe it was 2010 that they got rid of them completely. So any of the new graduates will have either private loans or those direct loans. And the direct loans you haven't been making any payments on, but that also means that you have not selected, for the vast majority of new graduates, they have not selected a repayment plan. So that's something that they're going to want to have in place, because otherwise they're going to go into the standard repayment, which takes their loans and amortizes them over a 10-year period, where basically they take the amount that you owe and whatever your interest rate is and spreads it out over a 10-year period, just like a mortgage or something like that.
Yeah, that's how my student loan was. And I didn't even realize there was like other options for paying it down. And just, thankfully, whatever the payment was something that we were able to budget and fit into our like monthly spending. But what are the options? And you say like select something. I don't remember like seeing an option to select anything. Like, is this something that you have to go look for, or is it something that your loan provider is going to kind of reach out to you about and say like, hey, what do you want to do?
The loan servicers will not reach out to you. They want to try to get as much out of you as possible. And so the standard repayment guarantees that they're going to get interest on their loan. There are many different repayments, but we've got 4 main ones. So the standard repayment is just and this is assuming that you don't do any sort of a consolidation. We can come back to that in a minute of what that means. But if you don't do any sort of consolidation, there's the 10-year standard repayment. And then you have the option, if you have certain balance sizes, of doing what's called an extended repayment, which you can spread out up to 25 years, which of course means you pay a lot more on your interest, but it helps to be able to manage your monthly payment. There's also the graduated. Graduated is really for teachers. I would not suggest it because the graduated, the way it works is that every 2 years, your payment bumps up a little bit more because they assume that when you're starting the way it's structured is so that way when you're starting your career, you likely aren't going to be making the vast majority of your money, and you will later on in your career. So this could be a really good move for like doctors or dentists, where they're going to see significant increases in income over the 20 to 25 years that they're repaying their loans, which is also crazy to think about. But it bumps it up a little bit along the way. So those are the 3 main the one side of the student loan options, the student loan repayment options. The other side is what's called the income-driven repayment plans. And inside the income-driven repayment plans, this is where it gets mind-boggling confusing, by the way, Rob. So
awesome.
Tell me where we need to stop so we can talk about it. But inside so it's called the IDR, income-driven repayment. Inside of the IDR plans, there are 5 and going to be a 6th repayment plan. So this is where it gets incredibly confusing. But there's income contingent repayment, which is ICR. There's the IBR, which is income-based repayment, both the old and the new version of that. There's the pay-as-you-earn, which is called PAYE, P-A-Y-E. And then there's a revised pay-as-you-earn, which is R-E-P-A-Y-E, repay. And then with all the craziness going on, the same day that they announced the student loan blockage, they also announced a 6th repayment plan that will actually take over for the repay plan called SAVE, which is Saving on a Valuable Education. They have to make an acronym out of it, right? So,
of course.
So that right there, can you understand why this is such a confusing topic for so many people? And by the way, inside of each of those repayment plans, there's rules as to who qualifies and who doesn't qualify, and which loans you can have to fit into certain repayment plans. And it's an absolute nightmare that they expect people to be able to navigate this on their own. It's kind of the hard part.
That's why I find with personal finance, there are just some topics that are so much more complicated than the others, and we haven't found a way to simplify these yet. Like insurance definitely comes to mind, taxes sometimes comes to mind, and then this is now come to mind. I was like, oh, I did not realize this was like, what is the difference between like income contingent repayments and income based repayments? Like what?
Okay, we're going to take it one step further. So this is where we level in. So for the people that don't like numbers, this is where it's going to get a little bit confusing. So there is a thing out there called the Federal Poverty Guidelines. Mm-hmm. And the Federal Poverty Guidelines take it shows your family size and what the Federal Poverty Guideline is for your family size. So I've got it pulled up here in front of me. So for a family size of 1, the Federal Poverty Guideline is 14,580. You don't need to remember that number, but it's important to know right off the bat. For the income contingent repayment, they use exactly what the Federal Poverty Guideline is to deduct off of your adjusted gross income. So you don't have to pay on the first $14,580 of your income. Okay. On all of the rest of the plans, currently you get a multiplier on your on that Federal Poverty Guideline of a 1.5 multiplier on everything except for income contingent repayment. So that means that in the IBR, which they have an old and a new version of that, the pay and the repay, they use that 1.5 multiplier. So you get to deduct more money from your adjusted gross income, which means you pay less on it when you're in an income-driven repayment plan. Very confusing.
Okay, but can I try and like summarize it and see if I'm on track here? So the Federal Poverty Guideline is how much money that the federal government has determined that you could make. And there's a line, if you're under that line, you're going to see, severe trouble in trying to just survive anywhere in the US based on the cost of living. If you're above it, it should be better. So what they're saying is if you take that amount out of your gross pay, so how much your salary is or your pay before taxes, we're saying you can live off of that part, and then we will start calculating student loans based on the other part, the remaining part, because that should be more discretionary income, right? That
is an incredible way to summarize it. Yes, sweet. Exactly. So the newest repayment plan, which I know we're also going to come back to later, we're going to kind of circle around on things, but the SAVE repayment plan will now take that income, that Federal Poverty Guideline, and give you a 2.25 multiplier. So that's the big part of this whole thing. This is why that announcement, the same day as the student loan blockage, when they announced this other repayment plan, you're going to, for most people, the large majority of people, are going to save an unreal amount of money because of this new repayment plan that they announced the same day.
Okay. And so that is, from what I understand, they're increasing the amount. They're saying you can live off of this and we will make your payment based on the other part. When you opt into or do you have to opt into this, or is this something that everyone is just kind of like put into automatically?
You have to choose it as your repayment plan.
Okay.
So, and I think, so this is the part that's still a little bit unclear because they just announced this 2 or 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. At some point, they're talking about getting rid of the rest of the repayment plans, and it will be a single repayment plan of just the SAVE, but we're not there yet. So for not everybody. So there's so many different intangibles, right, and variables. But for a large percentage of people, that new plan will be the best route to go. And the only time that it won't be is if your income was dramatically lower. Right now, for the income-based repayments, so that's or the income-driven repayments, so that's the umbrella of all the income-driven plans out there. They're using the data from your 2019 tax returns, unless you graduated within the last 3 years. So if you were making significantly less in 2019, it may be in your best advantage to continue to use that as your basis right there. If you're making about the same, then it's going to be much better to get into the SAVE, SAVE plan. And just to give you an idea here, a family size of 4 gives you a federal poverty guideline of $30,000. And if we multiply that by that 2.25 multiplier, that means that you don't have to pay anything on the first $67,500 of your income. So that's why it makes a significant difference, is because it brings down the amount that you actually have to pay on your student loans for a lot of people.
And I think from what I understand as well, the amount that you're paying is what, 5%? Like it was 10% of that number above the federal poverty line, or whatever the multiplier was. So it was like 10% above that is what you're expected to pay in your student loans. It's been reduced to 5 now. Is that right? No,
not entirely. So
okay.
That will take place, they're saying, in July 1st of 2024. Also, the 5% only applies to undergrad loans, and the 10% will still apply to graduate level loans. And then what they're talking about is doing a weighted average of your loans based on how much you have in undergrad and how much you have in graduate, if you have a mix. Now, the part that is still also unknown as far as this is what happens if you've consolidated your loans together and you have now a mix of undergrad and grad loans all together. And I don't know how they're going to deal with that just yet, but I would assume, unless they've got a really advanced system, which it's government work, so I don't see this happening, but I would assume it would be that 10%, taking 10% of that income at that point in time, or that payment.
So the example you gave, what was the number again after the multiplier? So 30,000 for a family of 4, multiplier, it was what, 60 something?
67,500.
So if you made 100 grand, you would now have 33-ish thousand left. So you would say 10% of that. So 3,300 a year is what you would be expected to put towards your student loan.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right. So that's a rough guideline, I guess, of how much you could expect on that one. If you're watching, by the way, and you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. We'd love to answer those for you. This is meant to be a live interaction. So if you do have anything you want to get answered right now, we would love to answer it for you. If you're watching the replay, drop it in the comments. We'd love to come back and answer these for you later. So right, we signed up for the SAVE program. Now, what happens, like, say I'm in that scenario, I'm going to pay $3,300 a year towards a loan, and I've gone to one of these private schools. I've taken out 40 grand a year. I've got 120 grand of student loans. Like, that's a long time. That's what, 40 years to pay it off if there was no interest accruing, and it's going to be a lot longer than that with interest. So where's the stop? Is there a stop, or do you just keep paying this till you die? You're frozen in a very pensive looking state. I thought you were really listening intently, but yeah, your stream is frozen, David. So if you can hear me, exit the stream, come back in, I'll put you back in. And for the rest of us watching, hold tight for a sec. See if we can get David back. But yeah, that was the question I had. I was like, when does student loans stop? Is it like after, there he is.
I don't know what's going on here. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
We'll blame
Again,
it on
you were
Google
frozen
Fiber.
in a very, like, you're frozen, like you were intently listening. And it took me a second to realize you were actually like frozen. Okay. So the question I had was like, if I'm paying $3,300 a year on a $120,000 debt or $100,000 debt, and is that going to like last for 30 something years, or is there a time limit to when this is going to expire?
Yes, that's a good question. So there's two separate sides to this. And one of them is, do you work for a public service organization, like it being a teacher? And then the other side is the non-teachers, the non-public servants, the the people that don't work for nonprofits, which also counts. So almost entirely for what I do is working with teachers and their families. So which way do you want me to tackle this from?
Let's stick with teachers.
Okay, so teachers will likely not have to deal with paying it forever. So public service loan forgiveness is a program where you pay 120 qualifying payments on your loan, and then you can get them forgiven after that. And it's a program that has made a lot of headlines over the last couple of years because it started in 2007, and the rules were you have to pay for 10 years and or 120 payments. And basically in 2017, a whole bunch of people applied. And the problem is that and this is where the figure comes out that you'll see a lot, is the 1% was accepted that first year of all the applicants. Well, the problem is that the rules weren't made very clear. And so you had a whole bunch of people who were applying for forgiveness that didn't have an income-driven repayment plan or didn't have direct loans. And so you had to have direct loans. You had to have income-driven repayment plan. You've got to make those 120 payments, and you have to be working for a qualifying employer. Those are the 4 rules for public service loan forgiveness. They have since modified that, and they've done a really good job. And by they, I mean the Department of Education, the Biden administration, and then we'll even throw the loan servicers in there, although I think they're doing it begrudgingly. But they have made some big waves. So last year they had this program called the PSLF limited waiver. And in the limited waiver, and this expired in October 31st of 2022. But basically what they allowed you to do is go back and pick up previous credits that didn't previously count for PSLF, that maybe you were in the wrong repayment plan, or maybe you were in the wrong, maybe you had the wrong type of loans. And they allowed you to go pick up all those credits. So that was great. This year, they've come out with an even better one. And this should be making the national headlines. It's not, but it should be. So the student loan cancellation, there's a lot of people that could have had $10,000 or $20,000 forgiven. For most, and I don't want to include all, because obviously there's some people that could benefit from $10,000 or $20,000. But for the large amount of teachers that I see, that cancellation wouldn't have even made a dent compared to the IDR waiver. And so the IDR waiver that's out right now, it expires at the end of 2023. And basically, you can still do those other 2 things. You can get credits to count that were where you were in the wrong repayment plan. So if you were in the extended or the graduated repayment plans, you can get those credits to count. The second thing is that you can get any loan payments to count if you were in the wrong type of loan. So if you had those FFEL loans, any payment that you made while in that loan counts now. The other interesting part, though, is that it will actually allow months of forbearance to count. So forbearance means you don't make a payment. You didn't make a payment. Those have already happened in the past. If you have 12 consecutive months of forbearance or 36 aggregate months, and when I say aggregate, I mean when you piece them all together and you add them all up, if it's above 36, they will flip those payments, those non-payments actually, from forbearance status to repayment status. And that is huge. Another thing, and this is where it gets mind-boggling. Are you ready for this? They will let you take different time frames of loans, consolidate them together, and get the longest repayment history on these. So what let me give you an example. So you graduated, I'm guessing, somewhere around 2008. Is that right, from college?
2011.
Okay, so 2011. Let's say you graduated from college in 2011. And since then, you've been making pretty steady payments. So you've got 115 credits on your loans. But you went back to school to get your master's. And let's say you did that in 2019. You waited a couple of years. So you went from 2019 to probably 2021. Let's give it a 2-year period. And now you have these master's loans that are probably way more significant in amount that you owe than your undergrad that you've been paying on for 12 years. You can consolidate these 2 loans together and get the repayment history on all of the loans to be what your undergrad loans are.
Oh, okay, that makes sense now.
So what we're doing is we're consolidating these loans. We're putting in a new public service loan forgiveness application, and getting people's loans completely wiped away, even though they just took them out in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. So you may have made 5 payments on your loans and wrap them together with some an old loan and get them wiped off your record.
And is this like a loophole that, professionals like yourself have found and are exploiting that we could expect to close soon? Or is this the intention of the program?
It is going to close soon. I don't know that it's a loophole that was never allowed. They said it was allowed from the beginning, but it ends on December 31st. So people need to make some moves on that front.
Okay. So yeah, there's definitely some stuff there, and I would recommend watching that through again and slowing it down, maybe pausing, rewinding a couple of times if you need to. I think I will be as well. I do have a question that came in for you. I don't know if you can see it, so I'm going to put up on screen for you. So gaming science teacher asked, when I switched from IBR to repay, I wasn't allowed to switch directly and had to do 1 month forbearance in the standard plan. Will it be the same for repay to save?
So repay is supposed to. So this is government work again. It's supposed to go automatically from repay to save. The other thing is that allegedly they're going to flip everybody that's in repay to the save plan before repayments start. So we're already in a forbearance. So having another forbearance tag on there isn't going to necessarily make a difference, because right now the COVID forbearance tag is on everybody's loans from March 2020 until right now, anyways, assuming you've been in repayment status that entire time. So the forbearance won't make a difference necessarily. If you wait until after October in order to switch, like for somebody who's not in repay right now, that maybe they're in pay or IBR, then I would assume that they'll have a 1 month forbearance. But you can actually call in and request them to waive that on there too. So you don't have to go into an administrative forbearance.
Thank you. And is that something like who are you calling when you do that? Is your student loan servicer? Is it a government program that you have to call?
Your student loan servicer is going to be the best place to start.
Okay. So then before we wrap up tonight, is there anything else you think that teachers should know when it comes to their student loans? I do want to ask as well about taking out new loans for any upcoming teachers that we have that might catch this. But, if someone is thinking about student loans, they're getting ready for October, is there anything else we need to know before that turns on?
So kind of we hinted on it earlier, but the way that you file taxes makes a big difference. Yeah. And there's a lot of strategies that go into bringing down your student loan payment. So what I always tell people, and it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but you are so much more in control of the amount of money that you pay on your student loans than what most people consider. So for example, and it works significantly better if you're married, and it's not to take away from the single folks out there, but you can play the 2-player game a little bit. So if you have loans and your spouse doesn't, that's where we'll start. You can strategically put everything into your name. So for example, if you've got a 2-person household and you're both contributing to a retirement account, well, let's take, you have to trust your partner on this as well, but take both people's retirement contributions and put them onto one person's, therefore lowering their adjusted gross income, right? The same thing with using the HSA, using the dependent care FSA. Anything that will lower your pre-tax income could be a good strategy to use, but you have to also double that up with filing your taxes as married, filing separate. And it makes sense for some people and it doesn't make sense for others, because it's one of those where you're probably going to lose out on some tax benefits by filing separately. And just a side note, because it's something I actually dealt with today, if you file as married filing separately, you actually are not allowed to contribute to Roth IRAs. So that's just an important little caveat to note. But yeah, that's weird, huh? And
did not know that.
And so, but you can use that as a strategy. So bringing your income down, then filing separately. I've had a number of people who bring their student loan payment down to zero because they hit that target of whatever their family size is times the multiplier. And to add on another thing here, because there's just so many things. But if you do file separately, your spouse does not count as part of your family size, but your children do. So if you are married and have 3 children, that's when you're going to have the family size of 4. So it's kind of another thing to think about there if you're filing separately. And that's only in the save plan, by the way.
And that would negatively impact your spouse, right? When you do married filing separate, I'm assuming only one person can claim the children as the dependent.
Yeah, there's some rules that go along with that. And I'd say talk to your CPA or whoever does your taxes on that to verify. But you're going to lose out on, there's going to be some significant things that you'll lose out on. But if you can bring your student loan payment down from $600 a month to zero, it may be advantageous to go that route.
And then I guess how knowledgeable would we expect the average CPA to be about this kind of student loan game? Because that just sounds like its own branch of strategy. And is your typical CPA going to even know about that? Or are they going to be like, no, we don't do married filing separate. That's terrible for the average couple. Like usually you would do married filing joint.
The answer,
I don't know if my CPA would know that.
Not a lot. No. Yeah, it's not a ton.
So then, and I don't know enough about CPAs to answer this question. Would they collaborate if we brought another team member in to say we brought you on as like my student loan expert? Would they collaborate together to be like, okay, let's figure out the best solution for Rob Phelan?
I would say you probably have to find the right CPA for that also, because I know some that will and some that won't, right? It just kind of depends on your team. Okay.
So then if I want to increase my team in this area, so the student loan area, is that a service that you're providing? Is that a specialized service that you can find out there? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, because again, all the acronyms, all of the like stuff that the average person doesn't know, that even after hearing it through one time, I'm like, I still don't know this. Like I wouldn't be able to go to someone else right now and be like, yep, do this, do this, do this. Can you get someone to hold your hand through this?
Yeah. And you're absolutely right there. It's just so complicated, and they continue. And by they, I mean, the Department of Education continues to add new repayment plans and new different strategies to try to simplify. And all that they do is make it more complex. That's what happens. So the answer is yes. There's an entire network of people out there that are certified student loan professionals. And it's on, you can actually find the whole list of them on a website that's the CSLAinstitute.com, I believe it is. The CSLA Institute is right. I don't know what the last part is. I believe it's .com. But there is an entire network of people that have studied and at least know some about student loans. But it's also important, I think, to find somebody that knows your particular needs. And so, .org, okay. And so there are a handful of us that are not only CSLPs, but also work specifically with teachers. And so, I would suggest trying to find somebody that knows teachers and knows your situation, rather than just finding somebody that kind of helps everybody, because there's obviously specialties. There's some CSLPs that only work with doctors and some that only work with dentists and so on and so forth.
Okay. And I will ask you for your contact information at the very end of this. So if you are watching, you're like, just let me reach out to David. Like David clearly knows what he's talking about. Let me either get a recommendation from him or let me talk to him directly. We'll have that contact information coming up in a couple of minutes. There was one other thing that you recommended we talk about, and that was the consolidation of loans. So this is, for anyone not familiar with consolidation, that's where you take a bunch of different small loans and you group them together under one new loan. So you essentially take out a new loan, you pay off all the old ones, and then now you have this new loan with all of those existing amounts kind of grouped in together. So it's just one loan to worry about instead of maybe 5 or 6, because a lot of college debt can be broken up into smaller loans. And you can do that with other types of debt too. So a second part to my question would be, can you consolidate student loan debt and other types of debt together? And is that a bad idea?
I've never seen anybody be able to pull that off. I think the only way that you could do that potentially, and I don't even think you can do it there, would be if you did a consolidation into a private loan, which I really, right now, with all the things that are happening in the student loan world, I cannot recommend that anybody do that. Now, that's not to say, so this is where a couple of years ago, it may have been smart for people to do a private loan consolidation. And now with all the things that are happening, it's like, why did I do that? And it's like, you have to make the decision at the time that's going to be, that you feel is in your best interest. And you can't go back and beat yourself up for something that you did in the past. But I do see a lot of people where it has really negatively impacted them, because if they would have kept with all these waivers and all the things that you can do to go back and collect credits, I've seen so many where they would have been eligible for forgiveness, immediate forgiveness, and they lost that by going into the private consolidation.
Okay, so probably not with the private loan. What about the student loans? So we know you said that you could combine like graduate and undergraduate debt together. Is it a good idea to just kind of go do that, consolidate your debt into one single one, or is it like consult the student loan professional first before you do something like that?
Absolutely. So I would say consult, because the problem is that there are times when the answer would be yes, and there's times when the answer is no. So again, it goes back to if you do a consolidation, you are going to have to right now provide income certification. Well, your income now may be completely different than it was back, let's say, from 2019, which is where the data would be coming from unless you've graduated in the last 3 years. But if you have not, if you've graduated before that, you're going to be using 2019 tax data. So let's say somebody was coming into their first year of teaching in 2019, the tax data from that previous year, maybe they only had, maybe they were working a side job and have $20,000 or whatever of income from that year. So in that case, it may not be advantageous to do a consolidation. But right now, with the ability to consolidate and get that payment history on all of your loans, for a lot of people that have varying degrees of repayment history, it makes a lot of sense to do the consolidation. So again, if you've got those older loans and newer loans, consolidate. Maybe you get your loans forgiven right off the bat. So that's a lot of that's a lot of what I see right now is basically, if you've been working since, let's call it 2010 to 2012, if that's when you started, and you've been making it doesn't matter actually if you've been making consistent payments or not, but if you've been working since 2010 to 2012, I see so many people that will come to me and be like, is there anything I can do? And I'm like, well, you qualify for immediate forgiveness. And by the way, I have to structure that in a very sensitive way, because I sound like a scam artist if I tell people, oh yeah, I can help you forgive $100,000, but it's the truth. There's been, I've helped facilitate right now a little bit over $9.5 million for teachers.
Wow.
But it's always, whenever I say that, it's like, it looks like you do, qualify. And I have to, there's just a way to say it, because it sounds
like
very
you consult your clipboard and based on these, there's a chance I think you might qualify. Yeah, you
I think so. Yeah.
Well, it's good. Yeah, because it is one of those things that if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably a fake thing. So it's one of those ones where you could very easily be like, okay, yeah, this falls right in next to that, like, hey, you've inherited a bunch of money, or
exactly,
the prince is calling and just needs $10, we'll give you back 100,000, that sort of stuff. So yeah, like I can see why that might be the case. But so yeah, if you're a teacher and you have student loans and you're like, wait, is this me? What should they do?
So feel free to contact me. I think that we've got a link that we're going to throw up here in a second, but I do have a newsletter where I put out weekly. Probably every third week is student loan based. Sometimes it's just whatever's on my mind of that week. But I stay very current with everything that's happening in the student loan world. Then there's a spot in there as well where you can sign up for a 30-minute free consultation. I'm very honest if I can help you or not, and I don't charge just for the consultation itself. And if I am able to help you and you want the help, that's the other aspect of it. We do charge for that. Then we also take on, we're a full financial planning firm, and so we do full financial planning, and that's part of it is the student loan, navigating the whole thing, because sometimes the one-off plans is not what some people need. They want the help for getting them forgiven all the way through. One other thing, Rob, to bring up is there's a title of student loans that I don't even really want to talk about it today, because it gets 10 times more complex than what we've already talked about. But a lot of
sounds like we're going to talk about it.
I want to at least address it, because somebody may be thinking about it. There's a whole segment of loans called Parent Plus loans. And these are loans that you took out for your children. And Parent Plus loans do now qualify for PSLF. There's things that you can do to make them qualify. But there is also a loophole that you can use, and it's a legal loophole, to get the Parent Plus loans to qualify for all the repayment plans. All this to say, there's options if you have Parent Plus loans, but they get insanely complicated beyond what we've already talked about. And I know it's already complicated. And so it take it to like 10 times more. Those are Parent Plus loans. And so if you do have Parent Plus loans, if you have Parent Plus loans and your own personal loans, that is a combination for potentially combining them and getting them all forgiven. I love seeing that. If you just have Parent Plus loans by themselves, generally the people who are taking out Parent Plus loans are also closer to retirement. And so there's things that you have to do probably now to get those loans in a spot where you can not only pay them and have a reasonable payment, but if you were to even try to qualify for PSLF, it can be challenging because you're so close to retirement at that age. So I just want to address it and say that we didn't forget about you completely, but it's just so much further so much more complex probably than what we want to get into today.
And this is one of those moments where like you can try and DIY, you can try and learn. There's tons of information here. I'm sure if you do watch it back a couple of times, maybe do some research, you can maybe piece it together, kind of like doing your taxes, where there comes a line for me where I'm like, I'm going to bring in the extra help because I think it will be worth it. And I do want to ask you, like, straight up, like, what is your fee if you do work with somebody? So if, I call you, we do the 30-minute free consultation. You're like, you know what? I really think I can help you here. What are your fees like? Is it a percentage of something? Is it a flat fee? And I do want to, ask, are you a fiduciary in terms of how you help people with their financial planning?
Yeah, we are. And as far as the financial planning, we are fiduciaries. And we also charge a $500 flat fee for that. To answer your question, the funny part about it is I've had people ask if we take a percentage of what they get forgiven. Mm-hmm. I wish it would be very, very good for me, but no, we just charge a $500 flat fee unless you have an extremely complicated case where it takes a lot more time. But for almost, I'd say 95 to 98% of the people that I've worked with, it's a one-time $500 flat fee that gets the job done.
Yeah, I totally agree with this comment. The complexity is as bad as health insurance. I find health insurance easier, actually. Maybe that's because my wife works in the health field, so we're a bit more familiar with health insurance. But my goodness, like this is like totally blowing my mind in terms of how much stuff is here.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
There's another question for you, David. If I switch plans to the save plan, will they do the reassessment of the income at that point, or can I still stick with the 2019 numbers?
Well, let's see. I believe the new IBR. So if you switch, then yes. So you're going to have to be to get to the save, you have to be currently in repay. If you switch to get on to repay, likely, I'm almost 100% sure on this, that they're going to make you do an income recertification. So the answer would be if you made significantly less from the 2019 data, it would probably be in your best interest to stay on the new IBR plan for a while. And then when it's time for you to certify your income, then you could make the switch over. So, and by the way, to recertify income, they're saying it's going to be, you won't have to do it within the first 6 months of when repayment starts. So from October until, let's call it March timeframe, you won't have to recertify. And then you will have to do it again on your yearly cycle after that. So if your time was to do it in November, this November you wouldn't have to do it, but then again next year you would. So you'd have some time to make some decisions before that.
Okay. All right, David. If people want to get in contact with you, tell us once again, how do they do that?
So I work for a firm called Teach Plan Retire. They could go to teachplanretire.com and find me there. There's also the Linktree link there. They could subscribe to the newsletter. Feel free to sign up for a time just to have a consultation and chat. If you're interested in the full financial planning, we have an application on that same link right there where you can submit that, and we'll talk to you about financial planning as well.
Okay, and any social media channels or anywhere else on the internet that people can get information from you?
I do a significant amount on Twitter, and so I'm David G _CSLP. And then I've got Threads now.
Don't we all?
Yeah. And I've got an Instagram, but I haven't been on there for a while. I took all my stuff down from that. So the best way is probably Twitter if you want to engage with some of my stuff. I do post. I give it all away for free, but the thing is that and I'm not trying to just promote myself or the other CSLPs here, but it's so darn complex that even giving it all away and telling you exactly what to do, it doesn't hurt my business. I'll tell you that. It actually helps.
No, we're all in the personal finance education space, and we understand that like there are those who will DIY no matter what, and putting that information out there will help them to get to that point. But there is also the person who will recognize, you know what, I either don't want to put in the time, I'm afraid of making mistakes. I'm looking for someone who is an expert to guide me through this. I feel the same way about taxes. I'm like, yes, could I take the time and go through and file my own taxes using online software and not make a mistake? Maybe. Am I willing to pay the certified person to do this on my behalf, who will find the credits, the extra things that maybe I wouldn't have known about or looked for or come across, and pay their fee to do that? Absolutely. There's a time and a place for that. And this sounds like it could be one of those, particularly with the sums of money that could get forgiven based on what we're talking about. Do you have time for one more question?
Oh yeah. Keep them coming.
All right, we got one more coming in, and if you do have a question, please send it in. We had no specific end time on this. I kind of allowed an hour in my head, so if you have other questions, please drop them in the comments. We'd love to answer them for you. So Caitlin said, you mentioned forbearance periods earlier regarding December 23 deadline. Does the repayment pause period count, or is it before the loan pause?
Oh, good question. So everything during the COVID repayment, the COVID pause, does count for public service loan forgiveness. So essentially, if you were on any sort of, well, it doesn't even matter if you were on an income-driven repayment plan or not before that. But yes, so basically you get 3.5 years, assuming that your loan started before that, that count towards the 10 years that you need for PSLF. Yes.
Awesome. So even though no one was paying in I guess the program's eyes, everyone was just paying, but they were paying nothing during the time.
Exactly. Yep.
Interesting. Okay. Any other final questions? Drop them in really quick. But recap of that, there's a lot to student loans, a lot more than I really thought there was going to be. So definitely use the replay of this. It will be just available on YouTube where you are right now. And while we're here, make sure you hit subscribe, because we'd love to have you follow along. We're going to have more speakers coming up who will be talking about different aspects of personal finance. We should have Dan Otter, I believe, from 403B Wise coming to talk to us about the 403B. That's going to be a big one, particularly as we start thinking about the upcoming school year and what you maybe want to do with your finances. Are you going to see an increase in pay? Did you get any cost of living adjustments? My district, thankfully, we have an excellent union who negotiated on our behalf. So we're seeing a 5% increase, I think, this year, which is awesome.
Nice.
Not quite meeting inflation, but it's still something. This is the time not to reevaluate. Like, okay, what do we want to put in our 403B? Do we want to increase those contributions? Do we want to put it somewhere else, like in an IRA or a brokerage account? Or is there some other way we want to use this money to meet our financial goals? All right, I haven't got any other comments in, so I'm going to say let's wrap this up. David, thank you so much for your time tonight. This was very enlightening in so many ways, and also raised so many questions as well, but I will do a big deep dive on those too.
Rob, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you all. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see any more stuff. Check out some of the other videos I have, particularly if you're a teacher and you're looking to introduce some financial topics into your classroom. I have a whole season of experts who have talked about different financial topics, but aimed at high school students. Have a great night. We'll see you all soon.